So I want to introduce Susan Glass. I became aware of her through our newest employee, Katie Watkins, who actually is a riding instructor at Garrett Farms. And Susan is one of her students. And Katie, when she came to work and realized that we were looking for speakers, said, "You've got to check out Susan Glass. She's a fantastic birder. She knows all the bird songs." And then, as sort of an afterthought, she said, "And she's been blind since birth." And this is, for me, such an amazing story. I can't wait to hear your story, Susan, and how you experience the wonder of birds around you. So she has been blind since birth, and she began birding by ear at age 4, which is very impressive. And she lived in Detroit, Michigan until she was about 5. And then she relocated to Los Gatos, and she's lived in California ever since, except for time when she went to Massachusetts for her MFA in English at Amherst. She taught for 30 years at San Jose State University and West Valley College, and she retired in 2013. And she writes poetry, and she's published a book recently called The Wild Language of Deer, which I'm hoping you'll be able to tell us a little bit about that. I'm so fascinated. And that was published by Slate Roof Press in 2022. She lives with her husband, John, and her guide dog, Omni, in Saratoga. And her 3 favorite birding spots are some of my favorite birding spots too: Rancho San Antonio, Garrett Stables, where you actually ride, and your own garden, and vineyards at Vineyards Condominium Complex in Saratoga. I'm really glad you threw in your own backyard, because we get wonderful birds in our backyard too, and it's such a joy to have a little micro habitat right outside of our dining room. So I also want to tell you that tonight's presentation is going to be a little bit different, because there are going to be no visuals. We're going to simply be listening, and we're going to be hearing stories from Susan, and I'm going to be playing bird songs. Now, what we're going to do is when we're about to play the bird song, Susan's going to describe her encounter with it. And I'm going to describe visually what the bird is like. My perception of the bird. I've got the birds all laid out here. I will describe them visually, much like your companion does on your birding trips. So this, I think, will give everybody a more realistic sense of what Susan's birding experience is like. And hopefully it'll kind of coax our visual imaginations, our inner eye, to see the birds with our minds. And I have no idea if this is going to work, but I'm really eager to try. So Susan, please let yourself in and take us through your birding world.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew. And thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be here this evening. I'm thrilled. I was telling Matthew before we started that I have long wanted to become involved in Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, and can't be happier to be squeezing through the door here tonight. I'm also thrilled that Matthew is willing to describe these birds, because when birding teams go out, the best duo is always someone with really good eyes and someone with really well-trained ears, because you can't see them sometimes, but you can hear them. And sometimes you can see them, but you can't hear them. And sometimes the one you hear is not the one you see. And you're all smiling because this is what happens. And so I'm really happy we're going to do it this way. Should also let you know, I forgot to say something very important in the bio that I shared with Matthew. I work with a group in Berkeley in the East Bay called Birdability. And Birdability is a group of people with disabilities who partner with any organization who desires us to do so, whether it's Audubon or a local park or just a tour you're having, to help you create an inclusive nature walk. Accessible means things like having the disabled parking, but inclusive means, making sure that people can actually get there, and making sure they have a partner to walk with, and making sure that maybe there are benches along the way for people who maybe are older and need to rest, and making sure that you have audio description or the visual made verbal, which is what we're going to experience tonight as Matthew describes birds. And we work together here. I also want to invite everyone to join in when we start talking about how to identify birds by ear and discuss some of the methods that some of us use. Some are musical, some are mnemonic, some are just, oh, well, that sounds like a buzzsaw. We'd like to hear from you how you place and organize your bird voicings as well, because there are just many ways to do this as there are ears to hear. So with that, I will tell you a little bit about my own childhood and what made me a birder by age 4. And I will also pause at certain points. If you have questions, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. The problem with chat is that it makes my voiceover speak on the phone and it's terribly distracting. I don't know what's going on. So that's why we're dispensing with that. So I think that I probably began birding before I could speak. I was born in Detroit, as Matthew told you, and we lived in the city near the airport in Inkster, where in the summertime you could leave the windows open and be deafened by aircraft, or you could close them and be too hot. It was an interesting choice back in 56 to 61. But we still had urban and suburban birds. And we also had a cabin on Lake Erie where we encountered a lot of birds. And I distinctly remember very shortly after I was talking, I'll place it at age 3 or so, listening as the morning came and I heard, woo, 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 was a mourning dove. And I thought, and then I have light perception. So I could see the light coming up in the sky. And I thought, that bird just went and got the sun. Because when you're 2 or 3 or 4, you don't know science, you make your own science. And I really thought for many years that birds went and called the sun in the morning, and that some of the birds, like maybe more of the doves, or maybe, in Detroit, it would have been the cardinals, would escort it home in evening. And I thought that the reason it wasn't around much in winter is because the birds weren't there to help it come. And, children have this theology, that we play with. And it's before literacy. It's before I came from a family who read constantly, and so soon language was a part of this whole mosaic. But in those very early years, this was just sort of making these up. I thought that flowers bit until I realized it was a honeybee that stung me from a flower. You put things together as you will. I distinctly remember a morning in Michigan in summer. We were going to go on a picnic out in the country somewhere. And I was in the backyard and I heard caw, 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 caw. And then I heard that caw, 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 caw that crows do when they're all on top of each other. And I thought, wow, I think those crows are over in Mrs. Slavic's yard. And if I listen to where the crows go, I can learn my way around the neighborhood. And so without a white cane or anything, I started walking around following birds all over the neighborhood. And I turned up in other people's gardens and they would bring me back home. And I wasn't really scared. I was following crows, and I was following cardinals, and I was following blue jays, and I was following purple martins. And, but I didn't know what they were yet. I didn't have names for them. I just knew they were very, very important. And I have a poem called Theology at 3 that addresses some of these things. But I think that probably birds were my first language. Birdsong was my first language. And then came language, English, that helped me place the words with what I was hearing, and a very loving family that helped to make that happen. At age 5, we moved to Los Gatos, California, where my father's new place of employment would be. He was working for Burroughs Corporation at the time. And we moved to Los Gatos in 1961, settling on a road called Montclair Road off Old Adobe and Quito and Montclair. It was a subdivision that had not been built yet. We were the first home. So we were surrounded by eucalyptus groves, some working vineyards, some abandoned vineyards, lots and lots of oak trees with parasitic mistletoe growing in them in the wintertime, fields of wild oats, just fields of and just a lush open place, eucalyptus groves. And what I remember, I've always had light perception. What I remember was the light just pouring in everywhere, and the smells, because in the spring, all of the orchards remaining were blooming everywhere. There was a particular morning, it would have been in the spring, probably May. I was in kindergarten at this point, but I hadn't gone off to school yet. I was sitting at the table eating a bowl of Cheerios. The windows were open, and I heard loo 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 lulu, lulu, lulu. And I dropped the spoon and I said, Mama, what is that? Lulu, 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 lulu. Well, right across the street were some very large fields with fence posts. And my mother pulled out a bird book and she discovered that we were listening to a western meadowlark. That bird, which we will play in a second and which Matthew will describe, started everything for me in a big way because the song, my vocalization is terrible. The song was like Claude Debussy doing Afternoon in the Fawn in a dream with a very, very special bird monarch conducting the music. It was richer than anything I could imagine. It was like every fairy tale you've ever heard. It was like every warm tone clarinet you can ever imagine climbing the sky. And I had to know what it was. And that's where the whole thing began for me. And I'll tell you where it went after that. But Matthew, do you want to either play our lark or tell us a little bit about what this lovely, lovely bird looks like?
Yeah, I do. This is a wonderful Western specialty, and as I'm looking at an image of it right now and trying to describe it, I see a bird on a post, on the edge of a meadow. There's barbed wire. It's a sunny day, and this beautiful yellow bird with a yellow breast and streaks all over the back and sides and head, brownish streaks. And there's a curious black V shape on the chest. And it's got its head thrown backwards and up, and it's making this beautiful song, which to my ear always sounded like "I'm going to tell mother on you."
Oh, that's lovely.
So, shall I play it now?
Yes, yes, that's great.
I have a backup. If you can't hear this, I think you're going to be able to hear this. So,
Yep.
Susan,
I'm going to tell
love the
mother
way
on you.
you,
That's right.
the way you articulated the sounds, the consonants and vowels of that song too.
Yeah, and it's so musical. It goes ba 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 da da da. So it's going up and down the scale, but not in a diatonic scale the way a musician would ba 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 da da. It's moving everywhere, and that helped cement it too. It's like a little staircase in the sky. But I like that you did the "I'm going to tell mother on you" piece because a lot of us learn our songs by ear, by mnemonics, by making some word association that works. Well, I was hooked, and my mother knew I was hooked because she was such a good mother. And we started taking a lot of walks in the hills with bird books, and we weren't recording at that time, but she would try to help me understand what we were seeing. But she found this. I don't even know if you can get these anymore. It was called Song and Garden Birds of North America. It was a National Geographic publication. And it was a little set of mini records. Remember records and turntables?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm old, but that's what I'm. And it was in the back of this big book, and you could play it, and it would say things like, "Picture yourself sitting on the slopes of Mount Greylock in Massachusetts. Below you are the maples and the beeches of the hardwood forest. Above you are the spruces of the conifer forest. We are listening to a wood thrush." And then he would give you a mnemonic. "Why don't you come to me? Here I am, right near you." And would do this for all the thrushes. And there would be a side for thrushes and a side for warblers and a side for, grosbeaks and just all these things all over the country. So I would put this on while I was doing homework. And I was getting these mini geography lessons about the United States, as well as learning birds. And I didn't even know I was learning because that's how childhood is. You have no idea. Until we went back to Michigan and I said, "Mom, purple martins." And she looked and said, "Oh my gosh, you're right. Mom, brown-headed cowbird. Oh, you're right. Mom, sounding sparrow. Oh, you're right." And I was hooked ever after. I have never been able to leave this alone. And I think that had science education been broader in the 1960s for people with visual impairments, I probably would have become an ornithologist instead of a literature person. But it's okay because I can do it now. It's fine. But that's how the whole crazy thing started. And I've been doing it ever since. Um, and so where I'd like to go with this now is cross into birding by ear, and we're going to go through some different species and ways of telling them apart that work pretty well. And the first thing I want to do is debunk a popular myth, which is that blind people hear better than people who can see. We don't, not at all. In fact, I have a hearing loss, and I'm talking to you tonight wearing Oticon hearing aids. I've acquired this as I've gotten older. I don't like it, but that happens. Blind people do not hear any better than sighted people. We simply use our hearing more to compensate what we lack visually. And so we get an even playing field that way, but we definitely don't hear anything any better. To be a good birder by ear, what you need is to be willing to listen constantly and have a very gentle, playful imagination. Be willing to, if you're a musician, draw on that to help you understand what you hear. If you like language and you like making up phrases, do it that way. If you're a carpenter and you say, well, that bird sounds a lot like a belt sander, which some of them do, go for it. Well, that bird actually sounds like paint going onto a canvas. Well, okay, let's do that. Whatever it takes for you individually to hear those birds is what you need to bird by ear. And the most important thing is to listen, 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 listen. Never stop listening, even though it's become much harder these days because of how much noise we are surrounded by. Ended the sentence on a preposition, sorry. But we've got airplanes, and we have freeways, and we have regular, day roads, and we've got garbage trucks, and the one I hate the most, the leaf blower.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just killing it, and it's killing it for the birds too. I'll talk later about how they've modified their pitches to accommodate some of this, which is what we discovered during COVID. But the listening is so important, from the dawn chorus to the middle of the day to the evening. There are a couple of really good resources that can help you. One is the North American Audubon Society offers a 6-part course on birding by ear that's online. And for anybody who has vision problems, it is screen reader friendly, or you can enlarge the text on your screen and it'll take you through various bird groupings. There is, of course, the Merlin Bird ID app, which everybody probably knows about on this call and works with. I love it. It's broadened what I can do, not only in terms of identifying birds in the immediate area, but helping me understand the histories of the birds. There's so much text in there. It's like a mini encyclopedia that you carry around with you. But what I'm going to do in the next few minutes, and this is really a crude division, I'm going to apologize in advance for those of you who are advanced birders. I'm dividing some birds into sound categories, which is what Audubon does, and a lot. And we're going to talk about trillers, and we're going to talk about whistlers, and we're going to talk about tweeters or warblers. And those are only 3 categories. There are so many more. I've chosen birds that are probably common to you. If you're hiking a lot, maybe you're saying, oh gosh, she picked things I already know. But I needed to start somewhere. So we're going to begin with trillers. And these are birds that make a sound that, if when you hear a clarinet or a flute and it's going, or sometimes, well, that's a triller. And I picked 2. And the first one that I chose was the dark-eyed junco. And I will ask you, Matthew, to tell us what our dark-eyed junco looks like.
Sure. It's much smaller than the meadowlark, about half the size, maybe even smaller than that. And it's been feeding on the ground, but it flew up to a low branch on the edge of a wooded area. And it's a sparrow with a black head and a pale pinkish bill. The back is brown, the wings are kind of grayish, but the sides of the belly have got sort of an interesting peachy wash, really pretty. And actually, as it sings, it's flipping its tail, and its tail has got white feathers on the outer edges of the tail that seem to kind of coincide with its song as it flexes them.
Marvelous. Is it flipping its tail the way a wren might?
Well,
Is it that kind of?
it's not held up, it's held down.
Okay, okay, okay. See, I just learned something. I didn't know about the wash on the body, and I didn't know about the tail. And this is why we partner with each other, because
Well,
I just learned something absolutely
you spent a lot
fascinating.
of time in the East Coast, in the Midwest, Detroit, where the
Yeah,
coast don't have
yeah,
coloration.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this, by this way, this bird has some amazing dawn songs we'll talk about in a minute, but let's listen to the dark-eyed junco.
Sure, here it comes.
Okay.
Now, that started in the middle of the song. I'm going to start it again from the beginning.
Okay, okay. You notice that little trill at the end of one of them? They trick you. They do that. And if you get up really early in the morning, they will change that song over 2 or 3 or 4 times. Donald Kreutzma, who's a professor of ornithology at Amherst, has written extensively about the multiple songs that birds sing, not just male birds, by the way, but females. And he graphs those with Raven software. And I think that's just absolutely fascinating. So that's our first example of a triller. And if you listen, you could hear the spaces between those notes. You can actually count them. But then you get someone like the spotted towhee, who does something quicker that's harder to count. It's buzzier. Matthew, can you tell us what our spotted towhee looks like?
Sure, it's another sparrow, but much larger, and it's got a very long tail with conspicuous. It's the upper portion of the bird is black, but it's patchworked of white spots, very very conspicuous and not good camouflage at all. But kind of like the junco, it's got a rich sort of chestnut color on the sides of the white breast. The head is black again, and oddly, it's got a brilliant red eye too.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
This
Nice,
this is
nice.
this is in a bush, in a kind
Ah.
of shadowy area of the edge of the woodland.
And am I correct, Matthew, in that that's a common habitat for these gentlemen? They are what ladies. They like those bushes, that scrubby stuff.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Because habitat is such an important context when we're birding. You you're not gonna say that you see a crane in downtown, because it's not going to be there. It's so knowing this habitat is so important. So let's hear this vocalization and listen to how different it is from that towhee. And we had a little house finch there too, didn't we? Yep. Yeah.
It's
The
very
little. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, it's very different. It's very dry compared to that
Yeah.
bell-like quality of it.
That's a good way to describe it. It's a drier sound. Maybe the wine enthusiasts can come up with what kind of wines those sounds are like. That would be really fun. It is a much drier sound. And I don't have a recording of this, but this spring, I've been utterly stood on my head by the fact that my chipping sparrows can sound like towhees and they can sound like juncos, and they're doing it to me on purpose. I swear. I don't know. And so I thought I knew this ID world, and I don't, and that's okay. That's kind of how this goes. But chipping sparrows, even though we don't have a song here, are also trillers. So are wren tits. They're fun because they beep 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 beep, kind of like dropping a little ball. Wren tits are so willing to sing that their voices used to be used in movies for background bird song that were made in parts of the country that they didn't inhabit, and the bird people got upset and wrote to the film guys and said, "Hey, wrong bird. Get your soundtrack right." So that was kind of fun. So there are a lot of trillers. I only brought one whistler today, and I'm really sorry. I should have brought more. The one I brought is the golden crown sparrow, one of our larger sparrows. But I have I was supposed to tell you where I was hearing each of these, Matthew. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The dark-eyed juncos are located in the redwoods and the scrub oaks along the road where I live here in Vineyard Lane. And the spotted towhees are everywhere where there's any brush at all, any low ferns along Saratoga Creek. And they seem to come into our yards as well. They don't mind the bird feeders. And so I mean, they seem to like that. So we're hearing them there. The golden crown sparrow would arrive very punctually at my home in Los Gatos in late September and early October. And we had 4 enormous oak trees on the property, as well as a hill of rosemary that my parents had planted, and a number of smaller trees. My dad put in a rose arbor and some orange trees, but I'm pretty sure they were in the oaks, and they would come in the fall, and they had this beautiful whistle that sounded to me as if the bird was saying, "I am leaving," or just, "I am I am leaving." And they would sing on warm nights when the days were getting short, but it was still very warm at 6 o'clock in the evening. And we'd be in the kitchen serving dinner with all the windows open. And Dad would have his face in the newspaper, which was fine because he'd worked very hard all day. And we'd be doing whatever. And this bird would be singing. And I always knew fall was coming. And fall is hard for me because there's a less song, and it was nice that they were singing. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that they're here from about September to April, and then they take off and they head back for Alaska, which is where they do their breeding. But if I don't hear them, last fall they were scarce here, and it made me anxious. I mean, if I don't hear the bird I'm supposed to hear, it's worrisome. Matthew, do you have a description for a golden crown sparrow?
Oh, sure. So right now they're at the ranch where I work.
Oh, good, good,
The
good.
the adults they're a streaky, a brownish grayish sparrow, except for the head markings. They're pretty nondescript. They're streaky brown on the back. They're pale mousy gray on the front, but the head has got these
Mm,
wide black
mm,
stripes that run from bill to neck, and then in the
mhm.
middle there's this bright gold color, hence the name
Wow.
golden crown sparrow. And you're right, they're going to leave pretty soon, and they're all in their full breeding plumage, and they are singing like crazy.
And they'll keep singing all the way up to Alaska, I suppose, if they're not too tired. It's,
Yeah, in
yeah,
fact,
yeah,
all the Zonotrichias sing throughout the year, but they really
yeah,
sing
yeah,
more during the breeding
yeah.
season.
And am I right when they return? Do you see them at the ranch in September, October? Is that when they start coming back?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Because this is fun for me because I'm getting to corroborate some of those things. So that's a whistler. In the Midwest, our whistler, of course, was our cardinal. And also the gray catbird could whistle a lot and do beautiful things like that. And of course, some of the birds like the white-throated sparrow that do that pure sweet Canada, 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 Canada. And that's definitely a whistle bird for sure. Um, White-crowned sparrows have a certain amount of nasal whistling that they do. It's kind of interesting. Um, and then I brought, and this was a hard category for me. I was thinking about
Should
warbling
I play the
sounds.
should I play the Golden Crown?
Oh, we didn't do that. How silly.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Let me go ahead and
She's
play it.
had too much coffee. Play it. Yes.
Hmm.
And I just noticed something, Matthew, that sometimes the song is higher. Sometimes it's D D and then it's D D. If you have pitch sense, it's moving around quite a bit, isn't it?
Sure is. It has a
Yeah.
melancholy flavor, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. The Alaskan miners thought of it as a very sad bird, and I can understand why they would say that. But yeah, I'm so sorry, everyone. I didn't mean to jump like that. That was not good. It's probably because I'm a little apprehensive about this next category. I have trouble deciphering, between twitterers and warblers. And when I say warblers, I don't necessarily just mean the family of warblers, which is always confusing. I mean any bird with a very chortly, up and down the scale, play with a lot of notes quickly kind of sound. And I chose two, though in retrospect, I can think of many more I could have chosen. And the first one that I picked was less of a warbler and more of a twitterer. And this is the lesser goldfinch. And I've heard them quite a bit here in my gardens in the vineyards this spring. I hang out the little socks with the dandelion seeds, and the goldfinches will come and they'll hang upside down on those and they'll put their beaks in and they'll grab the seed. They also will do well with tube feeders that have really, really thin holes. But I think there's a lot out here that they're finding. And of course, there's a lot of insects for birds to eat right now, which they love. Um, the lesser goldfinches have a very twittery little song. And then the call notes that I hear a lot in the summer are cheer, 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 cheer. But the singing is going on right now. And it almost sounds, it's got the vivacity of a canary, but it's not a canary. It's most certainly a different kind of sound, a very, very rapid treble twittering, as though the bird were in a joyous hurry. I don't know how else to describe it. Can you tell us a little bit about our lesser goldfinches and
Sure.
why they're called lesser, by the way? Because I don't know.
Well, because they're a little bit smaller than the other goldfinches.
Oh, okay.
But these are quite small, really tiny little birds. And you described the sound perfectly. So they're overall a greenish yellow. The females are almost uniformly greenish yellow, slightly darker on the back. They've got a short tail with some small white spots on it, and a very sharp, very conical bill.
Mm.
Males are a little bit more decorative. They've got a black and white pattern on the wings. The back is a darker gray, so it's more contrasted against the yellow belly, and
Mhm.
the crown is black. So they're really quite fetching.
Makes you want to go out and look for them right this minute, doesn't it? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Let's hear them sing here. That would be
Sure.
fun. Yeah. What I notice with that song is that the pitches are relatively the same, but some of them are clear and some of them are a little sandy or gritty. They have a little bit of a in them as the bird sings that, but they stay pretty much within the same note range. And the little bit of sand or coarseness doesn't interfere at all with the beauty. It's part of it, I think. And really, really a favorite sound. And honestly, I can't distinguish the song of the lesser from the song of the American. I've tried and I don't have a handle on it yet. They sound the same to me. I hope I'll get better, but that's where that is.
That is a real tough distinction. I have difficulty with that too.
Do you? Because
Mhm, mhm.
I'm hoping somebody on this call will pipe up and say, "Well, you just have to listen for this," and I'll go, "Okay, good. That would be great."
Well,
Um,
they're also really mimetic too, so they imitate other birds. It's fun to listen for. You can hear the sound of a killdeer in a lesser goldfinch's song.
That is true. You can. And we've got a lot of mimics going on around here, not just the mockingbirds, but the starlings will do it and the lesser goldfinches will do it. And sometimes the even the California thrashers to an extent. Got a lot of those up at Garrett's. And there was one nesting near our barn the last 3 weeks, which has been really a treat because they're usually not that close. They're usually you have to go out on the trail. So it's been fun to hear that. Um, the next sound that really does feel warbly to me and sound warbling is that of the warbling vireo. And this bird sounds to me as if she or he is turning pages very rapidly and going just very, very fast. But also, there are notes above the main notes. So there's a melody and then there's some higher notes popping in and out. And my friend Judith tells me that these birds are often very hard to see, that they can hide a lot. And so, as you describe it, you can tell us whether or not you think that is true.
Yeah, absolutely. Vireos in general are kind of slower moving birds, so you don't
Mhm.
have the motion detection, which sometimes gets you on.
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
basically leaf colored. They take on
Mhm.
the color of the canopy. So if they're
Mhm.
in, cottonwoods or something, they're going to look greenish. If they're in some other sorts of trees, they might look tannish. It's one of my wife's favorite birds. They're really subtly marked. There are no sharp edges on this bird. It's small to medium sized with a pale belly and a somewhat darker grayish greenish olive back.
Mhm.
And the only feature on the face really is a somewhat darker line that goes through the eye toward the back of the
Mm.
head,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that gives it a little bit of a pale supercilium, but it's very soft edged. The whole bird
Mhm.
is quite graduated, a lot of gradient colors.
Now that you say that, I think when we hear the song, it's also rather graduated. I don't think it's quite as saucy as my first description. I think the sauciness might belong more to a purple finch or a Cassin's
Hmm.
finch or something. I think there's a let's hear this and see what we think. And you might have heard it. I think there was a Buick's Wren in the background, and of course there was an airplane because of where we live. But do you have any reactions more about that sound as you hear that, Matthew? Uh,
It sounds a bit choppy to me. I think
mhm.
I have the hardest time distinguishing that from house finch, oddly enough, because they both have this uh, yippity yippity chippity chippity chip choppity chip chop kind of
That's true.
quality.
That's
Uh,
that's true. Yeah,
but there's a handle on the house finch which you probably know about already. Um, but yeah, I think it belies the smoothness of the bird, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. To hear that with the handle of the husband, you think it's a little buzz call.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, and I think that's a breeding season call, correct?
Mm,
Like you.
I think I hear the Jreeb at the end
Yeah.
of the song pretty much throughout the year.
Okay, okay, okay. I'm learning as much as everyone else here tonight because I'm trying to learn when I should when I actually hear that. Um, we have a couple more for just fun. I am in love with acorn woodpeckers, and when I grew up, we had these four enormous oaks on our property. We had a third of an acre, and those little guy, well, not so. I guess they're a larger woodpecker, really, but they were just in there by the colonies, and they had one tree as their granary and one they flew to, and they were always pecking stuff, taking their acorns out and putting them back in at any time of year. And I've read about them. I've learned that acorn woodpeckers they live together in big families. They are, by human standards, quite promiscuous. So you have lots of couples raising lots of kids together. And they have a lot of play romantic antics at bedtime where they run around, in the tree from tree to tree and stuff. But their voices are so happy. And do you have by any chance, a picture of an acorn
Yeah,
woodpecker? Or
absolutely. There are not very many colors on this, so yet it doesn't seem it's not colorless because the the back is shiny black, jet black, very shiny, even a slight iridescence of bluish sometimes.
yeah,
Face is this clown-like harlequin pattern of black and white with a bright white eye, and on the top of the head, the nape and the crown is bright red. Um, and it's got these big patches, these big dollar-shaped patches of white on the wings. So for a bird with only two colors, or three colors actually, it's pretty bold.
it makes up for it in this voice too. Let's hear these. This is
Yeah.
yes.
marvelous.
That's a party, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
if that you call the police and say the neighbors are loud, but that's I've done some camping down in the San Benito area, and there are big colonies of them in the oak trees down there. And we have them all over Garrett Farms, and they are always up to something. They're just so funny. They're just delightful. And I think it's a sound you never or brapa 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 brapa. I've worked it into some poems because it's so funny. And I love the Harrys, I love the Downies, I especially love red-shafted flickers. I love the insectivore woodpeckers, but these guys just wound into my heart when I was really small, and I've never forgotten them. Um, I'm looking at the clock, and it's about 11 minutes to 8. We have the magpie, but is it a good time to see if we have any questions?
Sure. Let me just check if there are any
Yeah.
questions. Go ahead and raise your
Okay.
hand. Let me see. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. We'll give people another minute to think if they've got any questions.
Sure, sure,
But
sure,
I have a,
sure,
I have a, I have a question.
sure.
Since you've been birding by ear your entire life, essentially, um, I have two questions. One is, do you have a favorite? And also, how many birds do you think you know the song of?
I've asked myself that second question a lot. And I can't give you a number, but I would guess I probably know the song maybe of 70 or 80 species. And most of the birds I know are the inland birds because I haven't lived on the shore all that much.
Mhm.
So for instance, if you bring me over to the Baylands, I'm not sure I'll know a whimbrel from a ruddy duck necessarily. I'll know a coot, I'll know a killdeer, I'll know a curlew, but we all have our forte. I'm sort of an inland girl and a valley girl, and that's not a valley girl like LA. You know what I'm trying to say. But that's kind of what I know. So I know Midwest birds. I know birds of New England, having lived out there a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm really familiar with birds of the Western United States. Um, I'm guessing I might know 70 or 80 different species, but I would be very shy about taking a bird. I mean, I would do it for fun. I wouldn't say that I'm a master bird or anything. I'm just looking forward to learning more and more. Favorite birds, I've shared some of them tonight. I do love thrushes, from the American robin, who's our most common thrush, as we know, um, to birds like wood thrush, hermit thrush, and the varied thrush, especially. I'm extremely fond of those haunting calls. Um, and a bird that I really like a lot is the canyon wren, the one who
Oh,
sings down chimneys, and it's just a real spooky, haunting little sound when it comes along. And it's hard to have a favorite. I associate my birds with specific memories, where I was and what I heard. Hearing the canyon wrens in the canyon, and I mean, I even like the mockingbirds that wake people up in the middle of the night because the sounds reverberate so beautifully, off of everything. And I know that's common, but I still really really enjoy it.
I have never met a person who didn't love the Canyon Wren song. I mean, that all seems to be one of people's favorites.
You can't not, I mean, and the only one equally haunting is that varied thrush that goes ee, just kind of comes in. Oh, and if you're in New England, you've got to get to know the ovenbirds, who says teacher, 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 and gets louder and louder through the woods and just echoes right off those hardwood trees. Teacher, 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 teacher. It's a wonderful sound.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't see any questions, but we'll go toward the end, and perhaps we'll get some more questions, or maybe I'll have some more questions for you because this is fascinating.
Sure, sure. I think the last bird that I had brought us tonight was the magpie.
Mhm.
Um, and I saw a lot of these birds down in San Benito when we were camping. And they were so much fun because we would put nuts on the table and they would take the nuts and then they would bring us things in return. I
Mhm.
am not joking. I would put out a cracked walnut or a pecan. Um, and the magpie would take it away and come back with a stone or a shell or something. It was just the coolest thing. And I was touring the Coyote Point museum once. My mother was a docent there for a while, and I was in the garden there, and they had a magpie that it was part of one of a mated pair, and I don't remember if it was the male or female, but one of the pair had been killed, and the museum was caring for this other bird, and it was flying around the garden, and I'd never like to call a bird an it, would land on my hands, and I was wearing a watch, and she would take her beak and she'd tap, 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 tap on the watch for a minute, and then she'd fly away. And then she'd come back a minute later and land on my hands again and walk over them. And then she'd come back, and I put a penny in my hand, and she'd take the penny and come back. And there were such beautiful feathers on the magpie. She was allowing me, when she would alight, I could feel the weight of her. I could feel the tail feathers. I could feel the feet. And to be that close to someone wild who decided to share that wildness meant everything to me. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I can tell another wildness story really quickly. When I was a child, I spent a good number of time at Youth Science Institute in San Jose and Alum Rock Park. And I went on a number of their summer camping trips. And in one of them, we went up to Point Reyes, the seashore park, and we visited the bird banding observatory and walked out on the trails and saw the mist nets that are hung to catch some of the birds for banding, and also the little ground traps that catch the ground nesters. And we were out with the bird team, and they were explaining what they were doing and how they would free a bird and how they would band it. And well, one of the ground traps caught a rabbit. So before they let the rabbit go, I got to say hello to the rabbit, which was really fun, and the rabbit was like, I want to get out of here, but when you can't see, and I'm not saying that as a pity statement, but as a joy statement, to be able to touch occasionally the wildness that you love is so important. And you'll never get it from a taxidermy collection. Never works. It has to be someone alive and real. And so that was a real treat.
You can feel the warmth of their feet too.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, the feet. And rabbit was all quivering. Let me down, man. I'm out of here. It was really funny. And the magpie was so very, very friendly. And they also, at Alum Rock, once they had a little mockingbird who was crippled and had to be euthanized, but I held her before they let her go. And you could feel the warmth in the body, and also just the vibration of life in the feet and in the legs. I had pet cockatiels for a while, and a cockatoo. And so I have some sense of comparison when someone says, oh, that bird's the size of a Goffin cockatoo, or, that mourning dove is, or that. And it's nice to have those size relations when you can't see, and someone says it's the size of a robin. Well, if you've never touched a robin, what is that going to mean to you? So there's a little extra work to do there. And bear in mind that many visually impaired people have sight. And so those comparisons make perfect sense. My learning curve has been a little steeper. And that's why I'm so grateful for the singing, the bird sounds, and their singing and their calls.
Well, you're really experiencing them in a very different way from, a lot of birders are good listeners, but to be restricted to hearing them, it has to be a very different experience. That you're really opening this experience for us. I really appreciate it.
Sometimes it's frustrating because you want to know more than you know, and you want to know, well, is it the same bird I'm hearing, or did that one just move? So that's why bird walks are so incredible.
Right. Tell us the story about the magpie, because I've got the recording queued up.
Oh, the one oh yes. So the magpie, I was well, there are two stories. That we were camping down in the San Benito area, and the magpies were very friendly and gregarious, and we were putting nuts on the table, and the magpies would come and get the nuts, and then they would return with stones and shells to give us back. But what really brought magpie home to me was that I was visiting the museum at Coyote Point, and this magpie, its mate it was gone for some reason, and the people in the museum were caring for it. It was wild, but it was foraging and living in the gardens. It was quite tame. Male or female, I'm not sure. I'll say she to make the story more fun. I was sitting reading and she kept coming to me and climbing on my hands and exploring. I was wearing a wristwatch and she took her bill and tap, 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 tap on the watch several times as if she was interested in it in some way. And then I offered her a dime and a penny and she would take them and run away and come back. But to feel the flow of the tail and the feathers and to feel the weight of the magpie. And birds have a way of trembling with all their weight. You could just feel them. I've flown hawks before, and it's an astounding experience. And to actually feel that in the hand just meant everything. So yeah, tell us about the magpie. That would be
Well,
good.
so depending on where you are, you're going to see yellow-billed or black-billed
Or
magpie.
black-billed, yes.
So, but the magpies in general are gorgeous. They're big birds. They're not as big as crows. They're bigger than jays. They've got a long streaming tail. At first glance, they look like black and white birds with a
Yeah.
white shoulder patch and a white belly and white patches on the outer wings. The rest of it is black. But when you get close and get a good look at it, you will see this shiny iridescent color of brilliant purple, turquoise, green,
Mhm.
and blue on the wings and tail. Um, so the experience of the magpie for sighted people is very different. The sound for me also kind of awakens memories and associations. Shall we hear it?
Yes, and then tell me what your associations are with the sound.
Well, for me at least, it's a pretty simple sound, but I hear the habitat too. I think of the warm, the sunny road leading up to Mount Hamilton, the farmland, the barbed
Yes,
wire fences, and the grassy hillsides, and usually two magpies together.
yes.
They're being mischievous, pecking at some cow dung or stealing acorns from woodpeckers. So,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that's a
They're,
bit about their
they're those
personality.
warm and rocky weather birds, aren't they? Oh
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so that was kind of what we presented tonight. I'd love to know if people, have questions or reactions or, uh, there's so many more. I was looking through my collection today and going, oh dear, we should have done red shafted flicker. We should have done Cassid's fish. We should have, I just see so many things.
Covered a good amount. I should say that I really see a future in trips for the visually impaired, and I would be so excited to have you be a part of that, to be the leader and to guide people through your birding world, and help other people that maybe haven't been on a birding trip because they think they couldn't. How many times have you heard people say that they can't learn bird songs?
Right, right. You know, and I know I would be so happy to help with this because I'm a member of both the Silicon Valley Council of the Blind, which is a consumer group of blind and visually impaired folks, but also I'm on the board of directors for the Vista Center for Blind and Low Vision. And there are lots and lots of adults, and we're kind of hooked in with Bay Area older adults.
Mhm.
So there might be a way to put together some really fun group outings of recruiting people, and I would be willing to do the lion's share of the work, and whatever you wanted. I think that would be so exciting.